Porter, how are you today?
Fine, how are you?
Good, thank you. Ms. Porter, I'll extend the same courtesy to you that I have to all the other witnesses that have testified. You've had about 20 minutes since you last testified, and having had a chance to reflect on your testimony this morning, do you believe there's any portion of your testimony that was incorrect or that you possibly misstated with no harmful intent, or that maybe I just should have said that better, where in all fairness to you, you'd now like an opportunity to correct that?
No, thank you.
Ma'am, prior to your testimony here today, did you speak with anybody?
Regarding,
Did you speak with anybody regarding your appearance here today?
Judge, I just object and ask me to be more specific.
yeah,
Regarding the testimony?
Regarding the testimony that you're here to present today.
my husband knows I'm here to testify. We talked about it, my mother. I talked to, of course, Prosecutor Braun and Detective Meisler.
What did you and Mr. Braun talk about?
We ran over a scenario of what happened, from the beginning, meeting Mrs. Steins, listing the house, what happened in the ensuing days, just to refresh what did happen.
So you utilized Mr. Braun to refresh your recollection of what happened on that date?
No, I didn't use him to refresh it. I mean, it refreshed me.
Okay.
Meaning that if you're a busy realtor, you don't think about houses that sold a year and a half ago. So there are a lot of things that when you start talking about it, you remember them.
Okay.
I wrote a timeline so I would remember things just for my own sake as I remember.
Okay. You also indicate you spoke with Officer Meisler, correct?
That's correct.
And what did you and Officer Meisler talk about?
Very much the same thing. We talked about my listing the house, what happened in the ensuing days, everything we've talked about here this morning. That's what we talked about.
Is there any commentary about what you should say?
No.
Ma'am, we just had a 20-minute break. Over the course of that 20-minute break, did you speak with anybody?
About the case?
Yes.
No.
Okay, were you on the second floor of this courtroom?
Yes, I
Or
was.
courthouse?
Yes, with Carolyn Renlon.
Okay, and you were seen speaking to a male. You know who that male was?
Mark Mulligan got me a cup of water and brought it out, yes.
And what did you and Mr. Mulligan talk about?
Nothing.
Are you aware Mr. Mulligan recused himself in this case?
Yes, I am.
And may we approach?
On the record?
I don't need it on the record.
Okay, you don't need it, that's fine.
Ma'am, you were the listing agent for the property located at 653 South Lightner Road in Port Clinton, correct?
Yes,
And that home was owned by Helen Steins, correct?
yes,
And you testified earlier today that your first contact with her was on April 1st of 2014?
yes.
You met with an Officer Meisler regarding this case on 2 separate occasions, is that correct?
Yes,
And on one of those occasions, isn't it true that you actually indicated you first met with Helen Steins on either March 29th or March 30th of 2014?
I could have.
So is it fair to say you're not really sure when you first talked to her?
No, I'm certain when I talked to her.
Okay, and when was that?
It was April 1st.
Okay, so why, at a time closer to the time the incident occurred, would you have maybe said March 29th or 30th?
Because I didn't remember what day it was at that time. I went back and looked at my day runner and my notes.
Okay. You indicate that after obtaining the listing, you went back to your office, correct?
And after I obtained the listing, I went back to the house and put a sign up.
Okay.
And then I went back to my
And you went
office.
back to your office?
Yes,
And it's your testimony that the next morning, April 3rd, 2014, you met Mr. Kraus at a continuing education seminar.
yes. I believe that to be true, yes.
And you approached Mr. Kraus.
Yes, I did.
He didn't approach you.
No, he did not.
Okay, and you inquired with him as to whether or not he could assist or knew anyone who could assist with respect to an auction.
I asked him if he knew anyone. I didn't ask if he could assist. I asked if he knew anyone who did things like that.
And you say you've known him professionally for 5 years.
No, I said I've known of him for 8 years.
Ma'am, your testimony earlier today was that you've been a realtor for 5 years, correct?
Correct.
And you've known Mr. Kraus for 8 years.
I said I've known of him.
Okay.
Yes.
How long have you known Mr. Kraus was in the real estate business?
Oh, probably, to the best of my recollection, maybe 3 years.
Okay. Did you know he was an auctioneer?
Yes, I knew of him to be an auctioneer,
Okay,
yes.
so why didn't you ask him?
Because I thought he was a home auctioneer.
He was a home auctioneer?
I thought he auctioned off real property, houses, buildings, pieces of land.
Okay, and when people auction off buildings, it never includes the contents?
Don't know, I've never dealt with an auctioneer.
When Steve told you that he was in that business, you started talking to him about the house on South Lightner Road, correct?
No, I talked to him about the car on South Lightner Road.
Okay, you never mentioned the house?
I told him that my client might be interested in having someone do an auction on some of the property. I would be in touch with him if she were interested, yes.
And you also mentioned some lanterns, correct?
Yes.
Where were those?
Apparently they were in another garage.
Did you see the lanterns?
I did not.
Didn't Steve tell you during that meeting that he could be over to the house that same day at approximately 1:30?
Not to my recollection.
It was possible.
Anything's possible.
And in fact, he told you he could be at that house at 1:30 because he had another appointment in Ottawa County at 3 o'clock, correct?
No, not to my recollection.
Okay. So you definitely remember he said he couldn't be in Ottawa County at 3, but you're not quite sure about the 1:30.
No, I'm not sure about any of that, no.
Okay.
I don't remember him telling me he would be at the house at 1:30 or that he'd be in Ottawa County at 3 o'clock.
Okay, so then you also wouldn't remember if you told him that you couldn't be there with him at 1:30, correct?
He knew I couldn't be there. I was at a class all day.
Okay, well, he was at a class too, right?
No, he was only there for one class.
I was only there for one
two.
class.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I can just take one at a time.
I'm sorry.
The question was, he was at the class.
He was at the morning class, yes.
And isn't it true that Mr. Kraus asked you for the lockbox combo?
No,
So you never told him there was no lockbox, but that the back door is open and just let yourself in?
no, I never told him that.
You never told him that all the outbuildings were unlocked as well?
I'm sure I told him the outbuildings were unlocked. I'm sure I did. That's where he was supposed to be. So that was what I would have had a discussion with him about.
Didn't you tell Mr. Kraus to prepare himself as the house was a complete disaster?
No,
Never said. You told him there was no power at the house,
I
correct?
did tell him there was no power, yes.
Okay,
I believe I probably said there were no utilities.
okay. If he was only looking at the garage, why does it matter if there's no utilities?
Well, my garage has utilities. It was a dark, rainy day.
You said no one had lived there for about 9 years, correct?
My understanding was no one had lived there for 8 years at that time. Helen was, when Helen and I met, she wasn't certain about the time frame. I heard anywhere from 5 to 8 years, so I can't tell you how long it was, but I know for certain it was at least 5.
And Steve asked you how bad the property was. He asked you if there was carcasses and things of that nature, correct?
No, first of all, there were no carcasses, but no, he never asked me that.
Did you go through the entire house?
I went through the main level and partway up the stairs where there were bedrooms. And then, well, you know, when I looked into the kitchen, and yeah, so I didn't go in the basement, but I was on the main level. I was up the stairs to the second level, and I did not go through the basement. I did not, or the attic, because there's an attic as well. I did not go in the attic.
So did you stop on the stairs or did you go through the second level?
No, we went up to the landing. She showed me what was her son's bedroom, what was her bedroom. Vague recollection of that, you know, of what was up there.
Isn't it true that on October 13th of 2014, you told Officer Meisler that the house was cluttered with a number of different items and impassable?
Yes, there were parts of the house that were impassable, and it was cluttered with items. Yes, that's absolutely true.
So it's fair to say you did not see the entire house?
I did not see the attic, and I did not see the basement.
So you're not aware of what may or may not have been in the attic or the basement?
Correct. I was not in either place.
You told Steve that your client was desperately in need of some money, correct?
I doubt that I would have said that. I may have said she was in financial straits and needed to sell the house.
Did you talk to him about a time frame of how long you wanted the auction to be completed?
I never asked him to do an auction. So no, I didn't talk about a time frame of when I wanted an auction completed.
Okay.
No,
So you never told Steve that you needed it done in 30 days?
no,
Steve never told you that it would take 45 to 60 days?
no.
How was Steve dressed that day, do you recall?
I believe he had a sport coat and shirt and tie.
Okay, so pretty dressed up.
He was dressed like a business person should dress.
Okay. Steve called you later that same afternoon, correct?
I don't remember if he called me that afternoon. I was in class until 4:30. So if he called me, it would have been in the evening. I don't remember.
Okay. And he told you that there were some things that were worth some money probably and some things that were not, correct?
No. No, I actually do remember a conversation with him the following morning, but I don't remember speaking to him that evening.
Didn't he indicate to you that there were some items that he couldn't get in to see, one of those being the car?
No.
When did you tell Steve that you already had 3 offers?
I never had 3 offers, I had 2. And I told him, when I had the conversation with him, and again, I'm going back, I had a conversation with him on Thursday morning and told him that I was going over to Ottawa County to write a second offer on the house. And I was also going to present the offer that I already had at noon to Helen Stein's at McDonald's. So that, the conversation I had with him, I told him exactly what my timeline was on Friday. And at that point, he told me he was going to try and get over there and look at the car.
Didn't Steve mention to you that there was an option to sell the entire property, auction off the entire property?
He did mention that to me at one point, yes he did.
And he mentioned that you could probably get 80 or 90,000 through that auction.
And my client was not interested in that.
Okay, that wasn't my question.
Mhm.
Did he tell you he thought he could auction the property off for $80,000 to $90,000?
I don't recall him putting a price on it, but I do remember him telling me he could auction the entire property off.
Okay. Did Steve ask at that time for Helen's contact information to have a conversation with her about that?
No. I had already told him that I was meeting with her and I would talk to her about his services, and if she were in agreement, either she would contact him or I would give him her phone number.
Steve also gave another option. He made an offer that he could buy certain items, correct?
He did tell me he could buy certain items, yes.
Okay. And you told him that you talked to Helen about that as well?
And yes, I did.
Okay. When you spoke this morning, you told us that you told Helen of 3 options, correct?
Yes.
You told her you could sell the land for land value at
Mhm.
approximately $10,000 per acre.
Correct.
You told her you could clean the house out,
Correct.
and you told her you could redo the house.
Correct. Not that I could, but that it could be done, yes.
Okay, where did you tell her that it could possibly be auctioned off for 80 or 90,000?
I hadn't even met Steve Kraus yet, so I certainly wouldn't have talked to her about that. That was the day before I encountered him. So
Okay.
we certainly would not have had a conversation about an auction.
Okay. When did you present the offers from David Heinzel and the other party to Helen Steins?
On Friday,
On Friday.
which was April 4th, yes.
Okay, and do you know what time of the day you did that?
We met at noon.
Okay. And what time was it again that you found out that Steve Kraus, according to other individuals, had been in the house?
At noon.
At noon. Which happened first?
I don't follow you.
You said 2 things happened at noon. Which one happened first?
I was only at 1, so I can only speak for the one I was involved in.
Ma'am, you indicated you presented the offers on Friday at noon, correct?
Correct.
You also indicated that you found out that Steve Kraus was in the house Friday at noon, correct?
Oh, I found out after my meeting with Helen that Steve had been in the house.
Okay, and you have a fiduciary duty to your client, correct?
Yes.
You have a fiduciary duty to optimize, or at least present options that optimize her benefit through the sale or other disposition of her real property, correct?
Yes.
And you did not present to her the option of auctioning off the property for 80 to 90,000, did you?
She was not interested in that.
Ma'am, I didn't ask you if she was interested. I said you didn't present that to her, did you?
We had talked about that before. No, I didn't present it in a written form. No, I did not.
When did you talk about it before?
We had talked about it when we initially met
On April 1st.
on April 1st, on April 2nd. We had talked about her various options, and she was the one who actually brought up auctioning off the car. And I had no idea if you would auction off a car. And so we talked about those various things, and that's when I said I would ask at my office to see if there was someone. And she was not interested in auctioning off the items in the house. She wanted to go in there and take things out herself. She
Okay.
was adamant about that. So for me to suggest she auction everything off, she had already told me she was not interested in doing that. She wanted, as a matter of fact, when the house was sold, her choice was to have like a 60-day close on it because she wanted to have time to go in there and go through everything herself. And then whatever she didn't want, she would determine at that point what would happen to it.
Okay. Ma'am, help me figure this out. You originally told me that you didn't tell her about auctioning off the house because you hadn't talked to Steve Kraus yet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was on,
April 2nd.
well, I thought you said that was April 3rd.
No, I said April 2nd.
When did you meet with Mr. Kraus?
April 3rd.
Okay, so you had not yet talked to him, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when I asked you that question, you said, no, you didn't present that to her because you hadn't talked to Steve Kraus yet. Now you're telling me that you already knew prior to talking to Steve Kraus that she wasn't interested in that option, correct?
She wasn't interested in auctioning off her house.
Okay.
She was interested in having enough time if the house sold. And no one, at the moment the house was listed, knew how long it would take to sell. I had no idea there was a brother across the street or a son next door. And when the house was listed, she was adamant that she wanted a long period of time. We had agreed to a 60-day close on the contract, so she would be able to go in and take the contents out piecemeal until there was nothing left that she wanted. So as far as auctioning the entirety, she didn't even want the contents auctioned. So there would have been no sense to talk to her about that because she didn't have the means to empty the house.
So why, when I asked the question, did you say I didn't offer that to her because it hadn't been offered yet? What would it have mattered if it was offered?
It wouldn't have mattered. That's why I didn't speak to her about it. I didn't
Why did you-
offer it to her.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the answer. It didn't matter.
It didn't matter because she did not want her contents auctioned off.
Then why did, in your answer to my previous question, did you say you were going to present that later? Why didn't you just tell Steve Kraus that's not an option?
I think I did tell him it wasn't an option. I think I did tell him it wasn't an option. That's not what she wanted. She was adamant about
Ma'am, I
what she
have
wanted.
no other question in front of you. You indicate that on the morning of April 4th, Friday, April 4th, you and Steve Kraus communicated, correct?
Yes,
And that conversation was struck up by Mr. Kraus texting you,
yes. asking
stating,
if
are
I was
you up,
awake.
can you talk?
Right,
And you
yes.
said, yes, I'm up,
Mhm,
we can talk.
right.
In that conversation, that telephone conversation, Steve asked you if he could go back to the property and take a look at some things, correct?
No, because at that point, I had no idea he had even been to the property, so that's not correct.
Did he tell you that he thought, this is where he told you though, that he thought he could make an offer and possibly give her some money for some of the items?
He told me.
Ma'am, yes or no?
No.
Okay. Did you tell Steve that there was bad blood in the family between the brother in a wheelchair and Miss Steins?
No, I doubt that I had said that, no.
Well, you already had an offer from the brother at that time, correct?
I had a verbal offer through Tabitha Laroff. I did not have a written offer until 11 o'clock that day,
11 o'clock what day?
on Friday the 4th. I had an offer from an agent in my office. That was the only written offer I had on Friday morning.
You drafted the offer from David Heinzel.
I did.
May I approach? Ma'am, I'm now showing you what's previously been marked as Defendant's Exhibit M. I'd ask you to take a look at that.
Okay.
Let me know when you're done.
Okay.
Ma'am, what date is that? What date was the purchase offer made?
April 3rd.
So it was made April 3rd, not April 4th as you just testified,
Yes,
correct?
you're correct.
Okay, it was actually accepted on April 4th by Ms. Steins, correct?
Actually, it was accepted on April 3rd as well.
Okay, Your Honor, may I approach?
Oh,
Thank you. Your Honor, Ms. Porter, isn't it true that Helen Steins signed and accepted this real estate purchase contract on April 4th, 2014?
She accepted it an hour after her brother wrote it.
Ma'am, isn't it true that she accepted and signed this form on April 4th, 2014?
Yes, I'm assuming that's correct.
Okay.
And may I interject for just one
No,
moment?
ma'am, you've asked.
There's no question.
No question, thank you. So it would be true then that if you didn't talk to Mr. Kraus until Friday, April 4th, you already had a purchase offer in to Mrs. Steins from David Heinzel the day before, correct?
No, I did not.
Okay, ma'am, the purchase offer was made April 3rd, correct?
Yes, I wrote the contract that night before I went over there.
Okay. And he signed it April 3rd.
Actually, he signed it the same day Helen signed it.
So are you telling me that,
I'm telling you, it was misdated by one or the other. Yes.
okay, but you just, when I asked you that before, you said yes, it was signed April 3rd, and yes, it was signed April 4th.
Yes, and I did say that, and obviously I was incorrect. They were both signed on April 4th. I wrote the contract on April 3rd because I was given an offer over the phone, a verbal offer by David Heinzel. The contract was written, and when I met with him the next day, that was when he signed the contract, and an hour later, Helen accepted the offer.
You testified earlier that you received a phone call from Tabitha Laroff on April 3rd, correct?
I'm sorry, what was the date again?
April 3rd.
I received a call from her on Friday afternoon.
So that would now be April 4th.
That's when I received the phone call. Oh, I'm sorry. Which phone call?
A phone call indicating that there was interest in the property.
That was April 2nd.
And you indicated that you had, when did David Heinzel make you the verbal offer?
David Heinzel never made me a verbal offer.
Okay, so then
Tabitha
that,
Loroff called and made a verbal offer on his behalf.
and that would have then been April 2nd, given your current testimony, correct?
Correct.
And you said you went over there the next day to get this signature?
No, I did not. I was in class the next day. I went on Friday.
Okay. So David Heinzel's date on this form is incorrect, would be your current testimony?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And you didn't notice that at the time this form was executed?
I did not.
Ma'am, this is a contractual document, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Aren't dates very important?
Yes,
Don't you have a fiduciary duty to your client to make sure that that document's correct?
yes, I do.
When did you first realize that document was incorrect?
About 4 minutes ago.
Didn't you, isn't it true you had a conversation with Mr. Kraus that you had an offer from Helen's brother and that he would pay any price?
No, I don't think I ever said that.
Okay, did you tell him you had an offer from Helen's brother?
I don't think I told him who I had offers from, no.
Did
That
you
would
tell
be
him you had an
something-
offer?
Yes, I absolutely did that.
How many offers did you tell him you had?
I probably told him I had 2 offers.
Steve still asked if he could purchase some things, correct?
When?
After you told him about the 2 offers.
I can't say. I don't know.
You don't know if he ever said that?
If it was after I told him I had 2 offers, you're asking me a specific time frame. I can't answer
Let
that.
me make it more general. Did he still offer to go, did he offer to go purchase items in the home?
Yes, he said he would like to go through the house and see if there was anything for him to purchase. Yes, he did say that.
And you told him that it would have to be quick, within the next 14 to 15 days, because you had offers, correct?
I did not. But as a matter of...
Ma'am, there's
Okay.
no other question before you.
You can explain your answer if you want to.
As a matter of fact, if you read the purchase agreement, there is a 60-day clause after, so there would have been no need for a rush. She had 2 months to empty the contents of the house, no matter who would have bought the house, because that was what she asked for. And I did, in reading over that contract, did note that it definitely says 60 days.
Well, that actually would be what he asked for, correct?
No. That was part of the stipulation for Helen. She wanted 60 days. So anyone whose offer she would have accepted would have to give her that 60 days or she would not have accepted the offer.
Your Honor, may I approach? Ma'am, I'm showing you again what's previously been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit M, the real estate purchase contract. I'll ask you to look at page 2 of 6, specifically clause 6 entitled Possession, line 41. It indicates 60 days for closing, correct?
It does.
And that was scribbled over some other number, correct?
Yes.
And what was the original number?
I can't say.
It doesn't appear to say 30 to you?
It doesn't appear to say anything that I can detect.
Okay. But you'd agree with me, it looks to have been changed.
It definitely was changed,
May I
yes.
approach? May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
Thank you. So I assume your testimony would be you never told Steve it was okay to go back to the house and look more thoroughly?
Since I didn't know he had ever been at the house, I would have not have said he could go back to the house.
Okay, did you tell him he could go to the house?
I asked him to go and look at the car in the garage.
Isn't it true that Steve attempted to call you on the afternoon of Friday, April 4th?
Yes, I believe I testified to that earlier.
Okay. But you didn't answer the phone?
That's correct.
And he called you 3 times, so it would appear to be somewhat urgent, correct?
I think he would have left me a message if it was that urgent.
Okay. Did you call him back?
No,
Why not?
because by that point, I had talked to Tabitha Loroff, and I had seen the picture.
So you didn't have any thought that maybe I should talk to Steve to
I
see what's
talked to
going
him
on?
the next
Ma'am, I
morning.
wasn't done with my question.
Sorry.
You didn't have any thought that maybe you should talk to Steve and say, hey, what's going on?
At that moment, no.
But in fact, you testified that you would find it hard to believe that Steve would do that, correct?
I absolutely did testify that, and I absolutely did find it hard to believe.
Okay. So it'd be your testimony that after Mr. Kraus attempted to call you 3 times on April 4th, you never had any other verbal communication with him until the Republican Women's Function a couple weeks later?
No, I talked to him on Saturday morning
Via telephone or via text message?
via telephone.
Okay, and what was that conversation about?
Well, I told him that I had seen the pictures and I knew what had happened. And that was when he told me that he took things out of the house so he could see them in a better light to appraise them. And they were, those were things I believe that he told me he was interested in buying. And he wanted to see them because there was no electricity in the house. And it was another dreary, rainy day. I mean, it was a week of bad weather.
And what did you tell him when he told you that there were things taken out of the house?
Well, I told him he had no business doing that. And our conversation was very brief. And
Isn't it true that he told you that he took items out of the house because he noticed other items were missing?
no, not at all. I told you what he told me.
So Steve never told you that he was interested in a particular guitar?
No.
And you testified that you currently work for Coldwell Banker, correct?
That's correct.
But at the time this incident occurred, you actually worked for Remax Quality Realty, correct?
That's correct.
And that's who the house was listed through, correct?
Yes, it was.
Subsequent to this incident occurring on or about April 4th of 2014, you had occasion to have interaction with Officer Meisler, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Sure. This incident occurred on or about April 4th, 2014, correct?
Yes.
And subsequent to that, or after that, you had interaction with Officer Meisler.
Yes,
And that first interaction was May 2nd of 2014, correct?
I believe you if that's what you say. I really don't remember when it was.
Okay. Was it approximately a month later?
I actually thought it was longer than that, but
Okay.
it could have been a month, sure.
Okay. And during that interaction with Officer Meisler, you identified and informed him who you thought the person was, correct?
That's correct.
And you told him you thought it was Steve Kraus.
Yes, I did.
You even told him that Steve Kraus worked with Stadmiller Prudential Realty, correct?
I would assume I did, sure.
Okay, and you actually gave the contact information for that office.
I don't think that I would have known the contact information off the top of my head.
Okay.
I might have looked in my cell phone for a phone number.
Okay. And you told the officer that you were able to identify Steve Kraus from photographs that you had seen.
Yes,
And you gave Officer Meisler Steve's phone number.
I probably did.
Now, you don't have any other interaction with Officer Meisler until October 13th, 2014, correct?
I'm believing what you're saying is correct.
Okay. There came an occasion where you were contacted by Officer Meisler and asked to come back to the station.
Oh, I'm very sorry. The first conversation I had with him, I didn't meet with him. That's why I'm confused.
Okay.
The conversation that you're alluding to that happened a month later was a phone conversation. I was not at the station at that time.
Okay.
And that's why it seemed later to me when I met with him. I thought it was much later. It was actually October was the first time we met.
Okay, so
So,
May
yes.
2nd was all via telephone.
It was all via telephone,
Okay.
yes.
And then you're contacted sometime later, presumably the beginning of October, and asked to come meet with Officer Meisler.
Yes, that's correct.
And on or about October 13th, 2014, you actually meet with him.
Yes,
We're now more than 6 months after the incident allegedly took place in early April,
right.
correct?
That's correct.
And this is when you told the officer that when you first went to the house, that you attempted to do a cursory walkthrough
Right.
and that it was very cluttered and
Yes.
impassable.
It was, there were parts of the house that were impassable, but you could get through the entire house.
It was clear nobody was living there, correct?
I can't imagine anyone lived there, but I've seen houses like that that people have lived in. So
Okay.
I knew Mrs. Steins didn't live there.
In fact, you knew nobody lived there, correct?
I was told she hadn't lived there for, I told you, the stories I was told were anywhere from 5 to 8 years, yes.
That it was vacant for 5
Vacant,
days.
correct.
Nobody lived there.
Correct.
Okay. And actually, on the final document, actually on your agent detail report, you would put, home has been vacant for 5 years and needs cleaned up. Correct?
I think that's part of what I put there, yes.
Okay, you said it needs cosmetics and utility updates, correct?
Correct.
You indicated that the home is being offered for current land value and will not pass an inspection.
Absolutely true.
When you spoke with Officer Meisler on October 13th of 2014, you told Officer Meisler at that time that you had only known Mr. Kraus for 2 years, correct?
That's possible. So I did, Yes, that's possible.
Okay. And if, withdraw that question. Isn't it true on October 13th of 2014, you told Officer Meisler about Mrs. Steins possibly needing someone to look at and possibly sell her automobile, and the sale of items from the home could possibly take place at a later date?
I said this to Officer Meisler on the 13th of October.
That's what I'm asking.
No, Mrs. Steins didn't own the house anymore.
So if
No.
that were in the officer's report, that would be incorrect. Would you agree with me?
Please reread that, because I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
I'll read you the entire sentence.
That would be great.
Mrs. Porter then reported that sometime during the seminar, she had a conversation with Mr. Kraus about Ms. Steins possibly needing someone to look at and possibly sell her automobile, as reported, and that the sale of items from the home could possibly take place at a later date after the same home was officially sold.
Yes, absolutely. I've said that all along. So that's 100% correct.
So during the seminar, as that sentence states, you told him that there could potentially be the sale of the contents of the home.
Yes. I said that. I said I told him that when I met him. And that I had no idea he did that.
Well, I thought you said the only thing you told him to go look at was the car and some lanterns.
That is all I asked him to go and look at. But I did say she might be interested and I would have her contact him.
This October 13th, 2014 date, strike that out, withdraw that question. You also had text messages with Mr. Kraus on the morning of Saturday, April 5th, correct?
I don't remember.
Mr. Kraus is also a realtor, correct, in addition to being an auctioneer?
Yes,
So he has access to the MLS, correct?
correct.
You indicated that you first met, strike that. On or about June 5th of 2014, you had a telephone conversation with Jim Hart. Is that
Yes,
correct?
That's correct.
And Jim Hart was previously the attorney for Mr. Kraus. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is it true that the home was in foreclosure at the time?
I honestly can't tell you that it was in foreclosure. Helen told me that she was receiving letters that it was going on sheriff's auction.
Wouldn't that impact the sale?
Not until the actual process happened.
But wouldn't that be something you'd want to know? So that you could be forthright?
There was no action at that time.
You weren't sure, or there was no
Yes,
action?
no, I looked and there was no action at that time.
Okay, because you just said you weren't sure.
I said, okay,
In fact, you told Mr. Hart that the house was a mess, correct?
I may have.
And you told him it was uninhabited for 8 years, and there were no utilities on, correct?
I've testified to that numerous times today.
You also testified that you don't know what was in the house, correct?
Do you mean, no, I certainly did not have an itemized list of what was in the house, no.
David Heinzel lived across the street. I'm sorry, Clay Steins lives across the street from Helen Steins, correct?
No, that's not correct.
Who lives across the street?
I don't know who lives across the street.
I'm sorry, Roger Payne. Do you know Roger Payne?
I met him briefly, I don't know him at all, no.
Did you know who took the photos that you looked at?
I had no idea.
You indicated to Mr. Hart that you had conversation with Steve on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, correct?
I don't know why I would have had conversation with him on Wednesday.
My question is, did you tell him that or not?
If I did, I probably wasn't right. I was driving when Mr. Hart called me, and I was on my way to a closing, so.
Isn't it true that in your conversation with Mr. Hart, you told Mr. Hart that Steve was trying to help?
No, I never told him that.
You told Mr. Hart that it was your understanding that Steve had returned everything that he took, correct?
I told Mr. Hart that Steve told me he returned everything.
Say that again?
I told Mr. Hart that Steve told me he had returned everything and smoothed it over. Those were Steve's words.
When you found out about this incident, did you call and tell anyone?
I called Helen Steins. Are you talking about immediately after? Or are we talking about a month later, weeks later?
Well, who did you contact immediately after?
Helen Steins,
That's it?
that's it.
How about a month later?
Actually, probably 3 weeks later, I went to someone that I trusted in the Republican Party and told her what had happened.
And who-
And,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and she, in turn, contacted our party chair, who then contacted me. And I told him, to the best of my ability, what I thought had happened.
And this was C.J. Cam, correct?
The final conversation was with C.J. Cam, yes.
And why did you feel it necessary to contact somebody within the Republican Party about this?
Because at this point, I was aware that Mr. Kraus was running for state representative.
Okay.
And
What did you tell them?
I told him that he had gone in the house without my authority and without my client's authority and removed items that still hadn't been returned.
That's all you said?
That's encapsulated. I don't remember what the entire conversation was.
And why was it your duty to call the Republican Party and let them know that?
Because I felt it was prudent to do so in an election.
When did you find out that Mr. Kraus was running for state representative?
Sometime right after the incident, I would say.
So why did you wait a month to call the Republican Party?
I didn't wait a month.
And I just asked you, who'd you contact a month later?
And I said maybe 3 weeks.
Okay, so why'd you wait 3 weeks?
Because that's, you know what? I had to think about what to do.
Okay.
I'm not someone who likes to make rash decisions and then have to backpedal off them.
Have you ever had any opposition? Steve Kraus has run for other political office, correct?
Yes,
Did you oppose his position and campaign in those instances?
never.
One moment, Your Honor.
Your Honor, very briefly, ma'am.
Sorry.
I want to clarify something here. Did Steve Kraus ever ask you about auctioning the house? The house, not the contents, the house.
No, not the house.
Defense counsel keeps mentioning this 80,000, 90,000 figure. Where'd that come from?
Well, in reality, that is the mid-price I gave Helen Steins. I told her if we went in and cleaned the house out, that it was possible we could get $80,000 to $90,000. I actually ran a spreadsheet of each price. We did the land value 50, and then I did an 80 to 90, and then I did a 120 to 130. And what she would actually see as a profit after the liens and everything were paid for, what the difference would be. So that was actually the mid-range that I gave her.
Did Mr. Kraus ever guarantee you that he could sell the house for a certain sum in auction?
No,
Did he ever discuss what he thought he could get in auction?
no.
Did he ever tell you what the contents of the house were worth?
No. He also never told me what the car was worth, which was what I asked him to look at, so.
I was going to ask you about that. You never got an answer on that either.
No.
Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further.
Anything further?
Just one question, Your Honor. Ma'am, your answer to me was when I asked you, did Mr. Kraus tell you that he thought he could get 80 to 90,000 for auctioning the property? You said yes. You've now just told the prosecutor that that never happened. Which one of those answers are we to believe?
I said that he said he could get $80,000 to $90,000 for the house. I don't remember that.
Okay.
That happened to be the mid-range I gave Helen,
I have nothing further.
so.
All right, thank you. We'll adjourn until 1 o'clock. Remember the admonition, I've already given you, don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Anybody else, don't throw any opinions, any conclusions for the case. We'll see you back up here at 1 o'clock.